Serious, what's the creepiest, scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? Just after high school, maybe 6 months or so after 911, I was a van driver who drove the Meals for Meals on Wheels to the place where they get packaged up and taken for home delivery. Anyway, the delivery van only had FM radio and I was listening to 92.5 FM. When all of a sudden the station cuts out in a transmission that I can only describe as an American version of a number station began playing. It was seemingly random numbers followed by a long period of the same phrase repeated over and over again. The phrase was, "They took the crosstown bus," over and over again. None of the other drivers heard it, but man was it creepy to hear. Eventually the regular radio station came back on and they never mentioned anything about it. The scariest thing I saw was at the age of 16. I woke up early in the morning, 4 to 305-ish a.m. Me and some friends were supposed to go on a road trip. For the weekend, we had a long AF ride to one of the stops we wanted to visit, and didn't want to be there too late. I look out my window and it's still kinda dark outside. I walk downstairs and see wet footprints all over the house. And suddenly a big man like 6'7", I was around 6'1" at the time, just bolt past me and out the front door. Not really creepy, but I shot at least 5 bricks and bolted upstairs to my dad. Nothing got stolen, but things were scattered all over the house. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up. Kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared. I know animals can pick up on that shit and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room, so I looked over at the door and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this doorway. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I ducked and checked every corner too, but there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in and I completely believed someone was outside my door. I spent one summer in high school living with my aunt and uncle and keeping their 7-year-old daughter for them during the day while they worked. I was up late one night watching TV in the living room. The living room was right off of the kitchen, separated only by an L-shaped bar. I saw my cousin, out of the corner of my eye, walk down the hallway from her room into the kitchen. It was way past her bedtime, so I told her she needed to go back to bed. When I didn't hear her answer, I got up and walked around the bar and into the kitchen. There was no one there. I checked under the bar to see if she was hiding from me, and there was no one there, and nowhere else she could have gone from the kitchen. I walked down the hallway to her room, and she was fast asleep, snoring, so there was no way it was her. It baffled me, and freaked me out, because if I didn't see my cousin, who was the little girl that walked into the kitchen? Several years later, I was talking to my aunt and she nonchalantly brings up the ghost in her house. I laughed it off and she said, "No, I am serious. We have a ghost. Your uncle and I both have seen her and heard her. We call her Giggles, because we hear her giggling. We usually only see her in the hallway before she disappears." All of a sudden, I remembered the disappearing girl in the kitchen. I asked her what her ghost looked like. She said she had blonde hair with braids and wore a white dress. My cousin is blonde. On the night in question, I thought I'd seen my cousin in a nightgown walk down the hallway. But apparently it was the ghost that resides in my aunt's house. I saw a panther-sized black cat darting out of a water retention, artificial forest near a school in the desert. Logically, it shouldn't be able to survive there, but holy shit, I saw it. Animal control wouldn't let that exist. There isn't really food enough for it. And the summers get dangerously hot if you've got black fur. Must have been 45 feet long. It doesn't make sense, but I 100% saw it. And so did the friend I was with. Fishing on Lake Minnewanka in Banff National Park with a good friend. About 50 feet from shore. Around 8:30 p.m. I see glowing red eyes. Up in the trees. Like red. Like Predator, I guess. I do a double take. They're gone. I decide not to say anything. Maybe I'm tripping. Did just smoke up. Nope. 5 minutes later my buddy says, I just seen some glowing red eyes up in the top of those trees. I feel goosebumps. Yup. I saw them too. We look back and they're gone. We decide to aim the boat towards the shoreline. It's not dark yet, but sun is going down. We saw nothing. No owls. No goats in the trails. We didn't get off the boat, but we had a good look around. When I asked him about it, this was around 10 years ago, he just says he doesn't want to talk about it. I can't blame him, monsieur, but after all these years I've never heard or seen anything like those glowing red eyes. 30-40 feet up in the trees. Staring at us. I copied and pasted this next part. I knew nothing about the history when we went fishing there. For more than 100 centuries, people hunted and camped along the original shores of Lake Minnewanka. The Stony people call it Minnewanka, or Lake of the Spirits. They respected and feared this lake for its resident spirits. The early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. I used to go camping there. I do not anymore. Mostly because it's bear country for most of the summer. But yeah, also because of those bright red eyes. I will never forget that. Most surreal thing I've ever seen. Removed. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood. A few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night. An eventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going in to work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the AM, monsieur, my roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 course lights. I'd had no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out. And nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened at that time. About a decade ago, I was helping my sister and her husband move into their new apartment. It was in a far-off city, so I couldn't exactly drive home right after we were done. And their place was also pretty cramped. I decided to spend the weekend at her friends, who I'll call Mary house, for my bus back home on Monday. Now, Mary is a widow. I'm also a guy. Keep that in mind. When I first got to Mary's house, I was immediately hit by how unwelcoming the place felt. She was really nice, but the house just felt angry, as if I was an intruder. The building was also ice cold despite it being summer and there being no AC. It was off-putting to say the least, but I just chalked it up to nerves. Mary starts to show me around the house, but a feeling of profound unease begins to steadily creep up on me, starting right in my gut. Something is seriously off about this place, but I don't know what exactly. One room was her husband's study. It looked completely untouched since what I was guessing was the time of his death. Files, books, computer and keyboard, pens and pencils, and even a coffee mug. All of it was covered in some serious dust. The room didn't look exactly ominous, but it was certainly bizarre. She finally leads me to the guest room and I start to get ready to turn in. It's about 11 p.m. Monsieur, I leave the one luggage bag I brought on the floor, change into my pajamas, lay in bed and try to get to sleep. A few hours later, at about 1 or 1:30, I wake up to what sounds like footsteps. I don't worry too much about it, thinking it's probably Mary on her way to the bathroom or something. Then something hits me like a brick. These footsteps are far too deep and far too loud to belong to Mary. They sound like the footsteps of a bigger guy. Now, I'm sweating bullets, but all I can really do is stay still and try to go back to sleep. For a good while, all I can hear is the steady pacing of a large man just outside the door. I swear, at some moments it felt like whatever the duck it was walking into the room. Monsieur, I eventually fall back asleep. I wake up again at about 3 or 3:30. This time it felt like someone or something was pinning the covers from below the bed so that I couldn't move. I'm ducking, terrified and paralyzed in fear. After a few moments of struggling, I manage to get the covers off and then the bed starts to violently shake. I grab my phone and ducking take off. I hustle down the stairs in my PJs and call a taxi to get to a hotel since I'm way too spooked to stay any longer. Once I get off the phone, I quickly go back into the house to get my stuff from the guest room. Monsieur, I will never forget what I saw next. As I open the door to my room, to my complete and utter horror, I see that my luggage has been carefully placed on my bed, opened, and the contents have been completely strewn about. I practically shit a brick, scramble to get my stuff into my bag, and sprint out of the house. I haven't been over at Mary's house since Edit 1, formatting, spelling, and some extra deets. Edit 2. I never spoke to Mary about this in detail, but she did ask me why I left in such a hurry. I told her that I couldn't sleep since the house was so cold. She clearly wasn't believing me, but we both just silently agreed to let it slide. I'd later find out from my sister, who I also did not tell very much to, that Mary's husband had killed himself in the guest room. Monsieur, thank you for watching. Comment, if you have reached this far into the video. Have a good day.